Welcome back to the Broletariat. This is going to be episode 3. I'm Joseph Kaminski. You can find me on Twitter at Publishing Minds or on my website, josephkaminski.org. Bunch of stuff going on. For those of you who are just tuning in for the first time, the Broletariat is a lot less professional than all the other previous projects that we've been involved in, I myself specifically. This is not safe for work because of language, in case that you care, or if you're a 10-year-old that shouldn't be watching this. Whatever. This is a whole podcast, just for the record. Brothers of the Proletariat. It's dumbed down to the Broletariat. I didn't like the term Bernie Bros. I prefer the term Broletariat. It's not that difficult. Awesome. 100%, right? Don't get scared of the logo. We're not communists. This is a situational irony. I don't know if that's the actual term I want to use. I'm rolling with it. Nobody's corrected me so far. Neither will you. I'm here with one new co-host and one blast from the past. Elijah Hintz is my regular co-host here on the Broletariat, and Elliot Declet is here from previous adventures in editing and the Kaminski Code and anarcHistory and countless of other projects that have gone through for the past 4 or 5 years or so.
Ooh, yikes! I should put that on my resume. Hi.
You already did.
I'm definitely putting this.
Right.
I'm gonna reference Joe in my application to grad school for sure.
100%, man.
Yeah.
For those of you who weren't in for previous adventures, my political background, I voted for Hillary Clinton in the general election because I'm in a swing state and I'm not a retard. And I'm generally I don't vote for Harambe.
To be honest, I voted for. As I've said, I voted for the Green Party. So I don't know. Swing first, bro.
Oh, all right.
Swing state, bro. What's missing again, as you're not noticing? What you may be noticing is missing yet again is our so-called third chair of the show, Omar Wajeeh.
Yeah.
As I stated before, we're bulk editing. Editing. What did I say editing for? We don't edit this. Again,
recording.
Unscripted, unedited, possibly incoherent.
Yeah.
We're actually bulk recording these episodes right now. It's still Super Bowl Sunday. I'm pretty pissed because, the Patriots won, and I don't like sports, but fuck the Patriots.
I'm
pretty sure...
I'm pissed because I owe my mildly fashy friend $40 because I lost a bet. So
double or nothing.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyways, so yeah, it's still Super Bowl Sunday. I'm not sure exactly when these episodes are going out. I'm not exactly sure how many more of these we're recording tonight, but I believe this is the third one that we're recording today. And it's going great. If you thought we were kind of loopy in the previous episodes, yeah, just keep adding that on because it just keeps getting later and later. At the current time, it is 12:14 a.m. Same. So technically, it's not Super Bowl Sunday anymore. It's 12:14 a.m., so it's now Monday morning. Time is a magical substance. Moving forward, we are introducing a... Okay, we're going to start off that way. We're not talking about drugs this episode. Maybe in a later episode, but not this episode.
I don't see.
As we stated in the last... God damn it. I've already lost it. Where was I? This episode, we've already precursed this to, we're going to be talking about what the party needs. This is going to be the theme for the episodes for at least a couple before we get bored. And this episode, we're going to be completely talking about election reform and the party that the Democratic Party needs to become in order to sustain itself in 2018, 2020, and future elections to come. We're also going to be talking about the mismanagement of the Democratic Party and how it can be solved. So what do you chuckle fucks have to say about that?
The most crucial thing, I think, is that we need to recognize why we failed, and why we failed is that we appealed to, everything that we did not need to appeal to, and failed to appeal to everything that we did. Essentially, we ran the most unpopular Democratic candidate of almost all time, Hillary Clinton, and we ran on a campaign of neoliberalism and kind of faux identity politics. And
I would like to quickly say that you are, for once, outnumbered. In the very first Uncanon episode 0 of this podcast, I was the only person of us three that voted for Clinton, with Omar writing in Bernie Sanders and you writing in the Green Party.
True.
Now you're up against two swing state guys who buckled down and begrudgingly voted for the establishment Democratic candidate. So you're a little outnumbered this time around on morals, I believe.
I mean, yeah, slightly. I think at least the ethical implications of how we participate in democracy, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah, but I mean that put aside, like I didn't want to vote Green Party. Like I think the Green Party is kind of kooky, and like the only reason I think the only reason I voted for the Green Party is Ajamu Baraka. Like I honestly should have written in like Harambe or like fucking drill on Twitter or something. Like
I also have to say, recently, if you follow me on Facebook, I don't actually know how to plug in a Facebook link, so it's probably on my website somewhere. I got in an argument with someone, not necessarily an argument, but a discussion with someone on Jill Stein being in her kooky little world of immigration because she didn't define immigrants as people willing to flee terrible situations and embrace American culture and the foundation of what America is based on is immigrants. She preferred to say, we need immigrants because white people are dying and we need immigrant babies.
yeah,
Which
no,
brings me to the point of...
she was making the argument that like the United States' population is going to decline, so we need immigrants to like make sure our population doesn't go down in future decades.
Exactly. And I'd like to say the one main reason I didn't vote for Jill Stein is platform concepts like that of, yeah, no, immigrants are not baby-making machines to fuel economic growth.
Well, okay, to be fair though, like most of her reasoning for why we need immigrants is because she does recognize that like U.S. foreign policy is unjust, and in Latin America specifically, it's created lots of refugees, and that's the majority of immigrants are refugees, not actual like economic migrants. But this specific thing she shared was like.
It was not necessary to share it.
It was gross. It was honestly gross. And like the thing about it is that we don't need to appeal to like these sociopath economic conservatives who think that the only use for immigrants is cheap labor. Like we don't need to appeal to them. There's no reason to like share articles from their perspective because the reasoning that we should take in immigrants because it's the right thing to do and because we kind of cause the problems they're fleeing from is, I mean, that is sufficient.
Well, I hate the use, as I've said multiple times in this podcast, I hate the use of the royal we. We is always considered the neoliberal aspect here.
Yeah. Well, I mean...
the biggest issue I had with Green, with going Green in this election was, well, number one, that she had no experience in politics, like...
Yeah,
realistically, her as president, like she's about as qualified as Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's the difference between electing like a fake billionaire and game show host president versus electing a chiropractor president. Like either way, you're not electing.
Yeah, like you got. I mean, like, what do you want? The guy that's grabbing pussies by the buses, or the guy or the girl who's spray painting on top of tractors
I
or
don't,
what?
I don't really have a problem with like Jill Stein like vandalizing some corporation's bulldozer that's gonna like plow through native lands and I don't know, pollute the water. Like I don't have a problem.
Yeah, it was just a funny reference.
I don't have a problem with her like spray painting that, but it was kind of like if you saw the picture, it was like, why are you posing like that? What is?
Because it was fake.
It wasn't fake. It was.
Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't
she actually
the
did it.
fact.
She actually did it.
It wasn't the fact.
Well, I know
that
she actually did it.
It was cringy.
She actually did it, but it was like meant to be fake. Like the picture was fake.
It was cringy. Let's just.
Yeah, it was just cringy. It was like you don't want that public image. Why are you doing this to yourself?
No, well, like it.
Anyways, back on track.
Yeah, never mind.
Back on track, guys. Back on track. We're actually going to stay back on track this time. We are not doing tangents for a third episode in a row.
Okay, this time we're talking about campaign finance law. We're talking about corruption. We're talking about the mismanagement of the DNC and like who needs to be in power and who needs to step down, and who we need to vote out and you know especially like try to primary. And I mean that's
and right now, what I think the biggest problem with the Democratic Party is personally what I think it's the platform. And you know, I'm big on technology, so the best reference or like explanation I can give is a technology-based one. And do you guys know why BlackBerry went out of business?
I actually did not.
Nah, off the top of my head, no.
I thought BlackBerry got bought out. I thought they were still making BlackBerry.
Well, yeah, but like, do you know why they dropped in decline?
Because
in in a market where everything was moving towards touchscreen and having apps and smartphones were becoming more smart, instead of BlackBerry focusing and encompassing those ideas and trying to grab new users and to have more customers, they kept insisting on this same old formula with the BlackBerry keyboard that they still put in phones today to try and keep that user base they had of these old businessmen.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and those old businessmen abandoned them and started using like Apple and Android.
yeah, and I think that's the biggest problem. Like similar thing with the Democratic platform. It's like, oh, we're still on this very conservative side of the left, and on this very centrist, very trying to appeal to everyone and not offend anyone kind of platform.
Well,
That
um,
you kind of lose people that are passionate either way.
yeah, focusing like specifically though on like why this happens and like why the DNC's platform is so useless right now. I mean that's what this episode's kind of supposed to be. Is like it's instructive to look at. It's instructive to look at like the current masters of the Democratic Party, and the current masters of the Democratic Party are like Time Warner and various oil companies, and like as much as the Republicans are way worse on this, like the fact that the Democrats are still like pandering to these rich donors is basically why their platform is so unpopular, because Republicans, for all that most people really don't have a favorable view of the Republican Party, like Republicans appeal perfectly to their base, which is rich people, or like upper middle class people and billionaires and white suburbanites. Like, let's just be honest.
And we've talked about that in the past as well in previous episodes, where there's a certain cutoff point of a income value where people swap from Democrat to Republican, or Republican to Democrat.
Democrats offer absolutely nothing to working class people. Really, at this point, all they offer to anyone is like concessions on social issues to like their elitist base, like on gun control, and it's just.
So like, yeah, like I feel like we have this party platform that's still trying to like hold on to these, you know, like establishment business type of neoliberal user base.
Yeah, well, I mean, Democrats have historically been the party of the working class. Like the Democrats, and I mean in recent history.
Historically,
like,
since they became the party of the working class.
Joe can talk way more on this than I can. But like what we kind of need is a return to like the New Deal, I think. So
what we need to do real quick is understand that the parties that we see today are not the parties that existed 100 years ago. If you don't believe in the party pendulum, which is basically the Republicans becoming the Democrats and the Democrats becoming the Republicans, honestly, get your ass out of politics. You don't understand history, and I'm getting tired of arguing with random conservatives who like doing the push point of Democrats like slavery, Republicans like civil rights. Well, yeah, it's because the party switched platforms over time, and parties did not have severe platforms. So our modern day consistence of what is Democratic and what is Republican honestly has changed throughout history. And we need to realize, I know this is a little bit of a tangent, but it is important to understand before we move on to what the Democratic Party needs to do. America is a bipartisan society. And what that basically means is we rely on two distinct political votes to get a single point across. In modern day, we have the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, our current liberal and conservative figures. But we also have smaller and less vocal roles, such as the independents. Elliot, you claim yourself to be an independent right now, correct?
Yes.
Random third parties. For example, Elijah, I don't count you as a Green Party member, but you voted for Green Party, right?
I actually am a registered Democrat.
You are? Okay. You're a registered Democrat, but you voted for Green Party.
Yeah, and I want to see the Democratic Party be better and like be worth voting for.
So to understand our situation and where we're at, we need to understand the political pendulum. Republicans were then, not now, it is important, then, not now, they were the party of Lincoln. And many progressives that believed in change for society, usually for the good, found themselves in the new Republican Party under Lincoln after the collapse of the Whigs. For those of you who don't know, the Whigs basically could not come up with a historical example on how to fix slavery, and therefore they collapsed as a party. Now, the fact that people like Paul Ryan, our current Speaker of the House, third in line for the presidency, God help us, can even dare claim that Republicans today are the party of Lincoln, it makes our 16th president roll in his grave, because the political pendulum has switched. Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong, our modern day Democrats...
Lincoln would go back in time and shoot himself if he could see what the Republican Party is now.
Now, I don't want to make it seem like I'm attacking just attacking modern day Republicans. I'm going to attack old school Democrats, because the Democratic Party used to be a racist, vile group of political exorcism that shaped under the people, that shaped up, honestly. If it wasn't for people like Harry Truman, Lyndon B. Johnson, and, dare I say it, Richard Nixon on the Republican side, the political machines of this lukewarm establishment in the 20th century, if it wasn't for them, the Democratic Party would probably still be this vile, racist party. The concept of actual reform and the need for humanity to improve shooed people out of the Democratic Party. Now, our society wasn't always Democrat versus Republican. As I've already said, we've had the Whig Party, we had the Federalist, the Anti-Federalist, etc., etc. But that's where we are now.
And we've pretty much always, like, even when it was the Whigs and, like, the Whigs lost power and then the Republicans came in, like, only briefly has it ever not been a two-party system. Like, we've almost always had a two-party system.
And that's what makes us a bipartisan
parties worth mentioning too.
Yeah, progressive parties as well, the Bull Moose Party, but we're getting there. Now, I know this is going to be a long tangent. This episode's going to be a little bit longer just because this tangent needs to be said. I'm sorry. Republicanism was the platform, a new party back in Lincoln's day. It was this weird conglomeration. I know I said that word wrong. It's late at night. Give me a break. It's basically this grouping of various Northerners who happened to be former members of the Whig Party and who wanted to develop a West non-slavery kind of aspect party. They wanted to say, hey, look at what this is doing, right? They wanted the West to be, they wanted the entire states to be non-slavery. And now, obviously, there are three different types of abolitionists, and they weren't all radical, and they weren't all moderate. Make sense? So the group was there, but the group didn't have a concept yet. Now, it took the Whigs' economic views and the idea of promoting growth, and it kind of merged the three abolitionist behaviors. But get this. Republicans used to want to finance infrastructure. It wanted to give a lot of money to education, to protect American industries, and promote rapid growth for all races. Because that's what the goal of abolitionists was. End slavery, promote the, not necessarily equality, but promote at least the start to it.
Yeah, well,
and now we look at this.
A lot of abolitionists were white supremacists who just thought slavery was immoral. Yes, of course. But, I mean, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Not necessarily. That's why I say not necessarily equality, but at least end the horrors of racism. I mean, totally off track. Not racism, of slavery. So now we look at that. Right. Get that. They used to want to finance these sorts of things. That's a shocker. Now, the Democrats, on the other hand, were about as tradition-minded and conservative-leaning as our current modern-day republicanism. They wanted taxes to be low for the rich. They wanted to leave the important decisions to the states. They wanted to make a previous standpoint of them being the states' rights party. So basically, it's changed. And now the shift of these political units started at the end of our Civil War, and it continued for 135 years before Republicans found themselves lost throughout the age of gilded adventures and business expansion. Now, it may sound like I've prepared this. It's because I've written countless articles about this. I've given countless speeches about this. This is one of the things that I've tried my hardest to get people not interested in history to understand. Just because you live in an era where Democrats are liberal and conservatives are Republicans are conservative, I should say, doesn't mean it's always been like that. And we need to understand the political platform in order to change what our platforms are today. The Democrats do not need to be this shillish corporatist concept. They can easily be pushed back to progressivism. So without further ado, real quick, I'm going to give a quick breakdown of how the political party switched sides, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah. 15 minutes necessary. Please, no, go ahead. Yeah.
1865 to 1875 is where I start this adventure. to understand where the political parties switched. The end of the Civil War basically led America throughout the horrors of Reconstruction, and it made new economic reformation that led us into the Gilded Age. And this is where Republicans began considering corporate consumerism and capitalist expenditures at the aspect of losing their previous values. That's step one. Any comments?
No, it sounds intuitive, honestly.
All right. I bring you to 1896. The man William Jennings Bryan, if you don't know who he is, look him up. Well, he incorporated the Populist Party vote. And he gave Democrats this sizable left wing on not really social issues, but economic issues that they had never been able to grab in elections before. And it kind of led to a collapse in what the foundations of parties believed in when it came to economic politics. More on that probably later, probably not in this podcast, because that I could talk about for days. I fast forward to 1912. Everybody's favorite president, Elliot, insert your cringe moment here. Everybody's favorite president, Theodore Roosevelt, broke from Republicans and ran as a progressive. He ran under his own party, the Bull Moose Party. And he basically made a Republican progressive wing. And it was about almost half, as much as half, of the Republican coalition went with him. It cost the Republicans the election of 1912. It cost Taft that re-election candidacy. It gave Woodrow Wilson the presidency. Now, many people who considered themselves progressive or liberal in any sense dropped from the Republican Party to join Theodore Roosevelt. However, the Bull Moose Party collapses after that, and where do all these liberals go? The Republicans are now controlled by conservatives. Where are these former Bull Moosers going to go? 1932, Franklin Roosevelt comes into office, and he essentially adopts the entire progressive platform that the Bull Moose Party had, that his cousin made, or at least endorsed. And he incorporates that whole vote into his brand new Democratic coalition. So now this entire shift comes in, and it puts the party on a collision course. Now it comes to social policies and economic reforms being more liberal because that entire group of disgruntled former Republicans have been incorporated, been taken over by the Democratic regime, I should say. And this is where the parties start to take shape that we see today. Democrats switched from states' rights to federal government. Republicans lost everything that they had that connected them to men like Abraham Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt, the two men that they love to quote. So basically, when you see a Republican quoting Lincoln and Roosevelt, they're not quoting their modern day concept. They wish that there was still their party.
Yeah, but that party
is when the Democrats basically take over. Sorry, what?
But that party doesn't really exist anymore. I mean,
exactly. No, because we've gone through a second pendulum switch where the Democrats themselves have lost touch to Lincoln and Roosevelt.
Yes, exactly. Like
yeah,
there is no longer a party that represents workers or labor broadly. Like, and there is no party.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's the problem with Democrats. Yeah, that's the problem with Democrats, and that brings me to 1948. Just like how the Republican Party split apart with the fracture of the Bull Moose Party, basically how the Bull Moose Party wiped out the liberal vote from Republican existence, the Democratic Party found themselves in their own situation in 1948 at the beginning of civil rights. Sorry. Any of the Southern Democrats who were against civil rights, against any of the movement that was just starting to take place. Of course, when we think of civil rights, we think of the 60s, but the issue started in the 40s, late 40s, I should say. They basically split. And under Strom Thurmond, probably one of the most racist men to ever be, if you recall back, I put him on the same level as George Wallace.
Yeah.
Basically, they created the Dixiecrats, they like to call themselves, and I believe one of their logos. I could be wrong about their slogan here. I believe one of them was "The South Lives On." Doesn't that ring a bell? And that's basically where we hit 1964. Lyndon Johnson, perhaps one of the greatest political machines in history, who dropped his own racism in order to benefit the party, completely dropped the longest voting connection that the Democratic Party had: the South. Southern whites fled the party in flocks. If you look at political maps prior to 1964, Democrats were from the South. They won in the South, and now they don't. By making civil rights the official platform for the Democratic Party, the Republicans basically lost all of what's left of the black constituents that they had taken under Roosevelt. Anybody who was black basically fled the party, just as whites fled the Democrats. And so Democrats took larger cities, suburban areas, and basically left the South. George Wallace, a segregationist, tried to split the vote in 1968, failed horrendously. We all know that story. And then I consider the process ended at around 1969, 1972, around that area, when Richard Nixon basically a Republican, adopted the South in his campaign strategy in order to win the election. And that is why our political parties are the way they are now. And I think it is very important to understand the history of the political pendulum, because guess what? Throw in Reagan. The disgruntled people of America hate Nixon so much that they elect a man, Carter, the people's presidency. Carter is lackluster because, honestly, anybody who would have been president at that period of time would have been considered lackluster.
And
the people are already tired.
Let's say really quick, though, like, I think Jimmy Carter is probably, like, the most ethical president we've had maybe ever, but at least in recent memory. And it just goes to show that, like, politics is just an unkind blood sport. And
I put Jimmy Carter on the same level that I do Herbert Hoover. Probably would have been a better president in a different time.
Yeah.
The only reason I care about Jimmy Carter is because I can make a lot of funny nut jokes, but
Jimmy
Great
Carter,
contribution from Elliot over here.
Jimmy Carter's Jimmy Carter's guiding philosophy on governance would have been more acceptable like 100 years from now in some utopian society. It was I mean, not his economic stance, but like his like altruism and all that.
Exactly.
I think Jimmy Carter he basically proves Machiavelli's The Prince in saying that a good leader is not necessarily a good person.
Yeah, people don't like good people generally. Like people people like their leaders to be like.
Pulling back the point real quick, because I want the tangent to end just so we can get back to election reform. I'm sorry if that cut off any point.
Yeah, go ahead.
People are tired of Carter just because, as we discussed, history is not kind. And I do believe Jimmy Carter would have been a great president, and just like Herbert Hoover, in a different scenario, or at least be looked back upon as a good president in a different scenario. So the people elect Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan I count as the beginning of the other political shift. Now we're seeing the pendulum start to slowly go out of control in the completely opposite direction. Reaganism pulls the right to the super, super far right. And what does the left do? Rather than going to the super far left, they try to follow the Republicans in order to get moderate votes. And that's the kind of shift we've seen ever since. Republicans are slowly delving down into, after the 2016 election, I say they're approaching neo-fascism, neo-Nazism. They're starting to hit that point with their supporters. And Democrats, rather than fighting it with progressivism like they should be, blame that on the mismanagement of the DNC, blame that on the establishment shilling, blame that on corporate interests, whatever you blame it on, it's happening. Rather than accept the left, they're trying to follow neo-fascism into the pit of despair in order to win, and it's not going to work for them. That's the end of my tangent.
Can I push back on, on that last point, actually? Like, I don't think neo-fascism is a thing. I think it's just fascism.
I count neo-fascism. I count neo-fascism as a step to fascism. I see that as the early warning signs of something happening.
Wouldn't that be proto-fascism or crypto-fascism? Like
I mean, at this point, does it matter? I think this is another tangent that's more labels than it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I think
labeling is labeling.
No, I think
at least we're not calling it. At least we're not calling it the alt-right. We're not rebranding.
Yeah, I think it's important to call a spade, though. Like, I think labeling sometimes is important. Like, that's definitely fascism. We should. Not.
I mean, but like, neo-fascism, crypto-fascism, this fascism, it's fascism.
Yeah,
it's all fascism.
If we're gonna write about it academically, then yeah, but in this case, like, nah, that's just fascism. We should just call it fascism.
All right. Regardless, that's the end of my tangent. It brings us back to now we can talk. Now we have an understanding, or anybody listening to this should have an understanding of how we got here, presidentially, anyways. And if you still think, after that whole speech, if you still think that there was never a switch in party politics and Republicans have always been Republicans and Democrats have been Democrats, how about you just, delete your Facebook and stop getting in political arguments with people that when you don't have any idea of what you're talking about historically.
Which is to say that the Republicans and Democrats aren't organized by any philosophy at all. Like, the only thing that
they switch with the people.
Yeah, the only thing that organizes any political party is political expedience. And that means that that it's abundantly possible to change either party.
Of course. They aren't stapled down by ideas. They float with the ideas of who is in control of the party. And right now it's corporatist shills. And the corporatist shills are going to defunct the party if they continue.
I think, like, I'm glad what you said about the the right is going right, and the left, instead of saying, well, we're gonna go left, they're going right. And that's why I kind of wanted to bring up my little BlackBerry tangent there, because right now, like, Democrats are trying to campaign like the same way Bill Clinton would have campaigned back in the 90s. And I think, like, we're, how do I word this? We're marketing our politicians around baby boomers. And, like, sure, for the next, maybe the next election, maybe the next two elections, like, yeah, but the near future is we're going to see millennials start to vote, and millennials have very different ideas than baby boomers in terms of their politics, in terms of their ideas on society.
Well, I think on issues related to egalitarianism, that's true. Like on basic social issues like racism and sexism and the like, I think that's true. But I mean, the same things that have united political coalitions in the past are going to continue to unite political coalitions. I mean, at least so long as, like, capitalism is the defining organizing principle of society. Like, the thing that's going to unite political coalitions is going to be labor, essentially. So, like, if the Democratic Party can return to its roots in labor, I mean, its recent roots, not its deep roots, and become a party of workers that, represents the interests of workers, then I mean, it'll be able to appeal to millennials in the exact same way in the past it appealed to boomers and the greatest generation before them. Like, I mean, let's not forget that, like, the greatest generation voted for FDR because FDR took them out of the Great Depression. Like, the policies of FDR were directed toward the people who suffered most under the Great Depression, workers. And I mean, that's the policies that would alleviate or ameliorate most of the suffering under the Great Recession, which was caused by Bush, and those policies, let's be clear, is not the Democratic Party.
Well, Clinton and Bush, we have to put neoliberalism at its finest there as well. Clinton rode the wave of economic success in the bubble, and he kind of was lucky enough.
The real problem is that our economy breaks every 7 years. But
well, that's America's recession problem. And if you don't mind, you're going to hate me. I'd like to go on another little tangent for historically, just to make myself feel good, if that's okay with y'all.
No, go ahead.
Go feel good in another corner.
Wow, it's my podcast. I'd like to say that since 1945, we've had a recession problem, and it's hard to ignore the statistical data when it comes to economic recessions. Again, this is another one of my talking points, if you haven't been able to notice. We've basically managed to find a way to get ourselves in, like, an economic downfall, whether it be slight or large. As you said, every 5 to 10 years, averaging around 7 years, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, the
demobilization.
The banks, like, crashed the economy. I mean, because credit, the way we finance credit is so awful, as, like, systemically so awful. Like, the banks crash the economy every, like, 7 to 10 years, and I mean, some of these recessions are worse than others. Like, and some of them have external driving forces, like the Iraq War, for example, massive spending on military and low spending on economic development and labor. But regardless of how bad they are, these tremors in our economy happen frequently. And
exactly. Regularly. Now, demobilization was perhaps the worst possible thing to happen to America in terms of economics after the Great Depression, just because we shifted from a wartime economy to a non-wartime economy, and everything just started to hit. That was our first recession after the war.
Yeah, but we responded.
Economists.
To that. We responded.
Yeah,
to that
we responded to that
by embracing basic
wartime culture.
No. I mean, with Eisenhower, for example, we responded to the recession that happened after World War II ended by focusing on development. Like, we developed our
I think
infrastructure.
it's a little off track.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're
overall,
way off track at this point.
I'm trying not to get off track. I'm trying to swing it back around. Our first recession hit, and it gave us two different choices. And the two different choices was, do we pump money in social spending, building infrastructure, building all of these new things, putting education, or military spending, build up the military? We started with social under Eisenhower, and somehow we found our way back to putting all of our extra money and all of our money in general in the military spending in order to make the economy great again.
There's a very simple reason that we did that. I mean, one, oil became extremely profitable because it was so cheap, and to continue to harvest oil, we had to force it out of the hands of the locals, and to do, well, let's speak in frank terms, and to do that we needed an extremely large military, and we no longer just needed a national defense, which we already had. We needed an imperial level force. And that's not to say that we act in the classical sense of an imperial state, but we do have those tendencies. Our foreign policy does have those tendencies. Not we. Like, I'm not trying to go out and start an empire, but our foreign policy is fundamentally not unchanged.
The podcast is step one, man. Podcast is step one.
Yeah, the podcast.
Almost there.
We'll begin the revolution with the podcast.
Have you seen our logo?
But that's like the defining.
Damn it! I could have named this podcast the Joletariat.
Oh my god.
No, I wouldn't be here.
That's disgusting. That's so gross.
Oh, but you'll be on the Kaminski code, right?
Because it's not as bad.
But I think, just so we're all clear, we're about halfway through. So I think it's important to shift the conversation back over to
of course,
the root causes of
my point, just to say, I know we're getting into the reformation of election cycles. Just the reason why I brought up the whole tangent, both my tangents, step one to reforming our party is perhaps to stop pushing militarism and go back to social spending. That's all I got to say on that.
Can we all agree really quick? As far as the fundamental issues go, I think the most fundamental is that the Electoral College is an inherently flawed system.
Oh my god.
It's outdated. The only reason why the electoral system exists is because way back when the country first existed, something like 97% of civilization was illiterate, and therefore people and the founding fathers thought it was asinine to let illiterate, unpolitically activated people
because the founding fathers, for all that the Constitution was an enormous step forward in human history, the founding fathers were aristocrats. Let's just be clear. The founding fathers were landowning white slave owners, and
yep.
They wrote a constitution that primarily served landowning white male slave owners.
Yeah. And here's my thoughts on the Electoral College. Well, number one, of course, it's going to be flawed because we're humans, and humans made the Constitution, regardless of no one's going to make a perfect system, right? And the solution I'm about to propose isn't going to be perfect either. It's going to cause quite a few issues. But personally, I think we should not get rid of the Electoral College, but that it shouldn't be give or take, and that it should be proportional. I think that would work a lot better.
What do you mean by proportional as opposed to give and take?
As in, if in Florida, 51 people get
51%
get 51 people vote for Trump, 49 people vote for Hillary, excluding external forces, then Trump gets, how many electoral college votes do we have? 29?
Yeah, I think.
I don't know the
to be honest,
exact.
I don't know.
Well, he would get 15.
Yeah,
one over half.
The Electoral College, if it were more localized, if each city, for example, had its own elector or whatever like that, or each county or something like that, or each congressional district perhaps, then that would be an improvement, but I think the system would still be fundamentally flawed.
Well, my main problem that I hear from conservatives constantly is that, oh, if we didn't have the electoral system, it would just be big cities that would vote for the presidency because that's where all the people are, and big cities are Democrats, so we'd lose every time.
Oh yeah.
So-
Not if you
yeah,
factor
would.
not if you factor in gerrymandering.
Exactly,
Well,
but that's a whole nother topic on itself.
Well, but if there's no electoral college, then gerrymandering doesn't matter because
Exactly.
because it's
But I'm not
only-
proposing remove the electoral, and I'm not even proposing making it by district. But
I am
like-
I am,
like-
to be honest. I think like
oh, okay.
I mean, well,
Well, my thing is, though, hear me out on this. The electoral college, I can understand the reason why conservatives want to keep it, because if it wasn't for it, we are the United States of America. All 50 states matter. We are not the United Cities
well,
of
wait,
America,
well, wait,
where only
and-
cities matter.
and DC matters, and the territories matter, but the territories don't have
Yes.
don't have representation, and DC didn't have representation until how many years ago? So I mean,
Preach it, boy.
Not long ago.
so I mean,
So-
DC doesn't even have statehood. So
So like,
I have
Yeah,
a real
continue.
quick question to ask about statehood, a small tangent that I only want yes or no to, or pick one. Who do you think should become the 51st state? Washington, D.C., or Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico.
Puerto
I'm
Rico.
biased. I'm Puerto Rican.
Yeah,
but Puerto
I'm
Rico.
very pro Puerto Rico
I'm gonna
becoming
go
the 51st
I'm
state.
going to go for Puerto Rico just because it has more people, but yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Anyways,
Well,
tangent over. Continue.
yeah. So the way I would be okay with it is if like unnamed state has 10 electoral college votes. All right. 60 people vote for unnamed blue candidate. 40% of people vote for unnamed red candidate. Then the blue candidate gets 6 electoral college votes, and the red one gets 4.
Yeah, I don't know. I just that could work.
I believe there was a system named for that, but I don't remember the
that
name
could
for the system.
that could work, but at that point, if it's proportional, then why not just do direct democracy instead of a proportional sort of democracy? Like,
Because
go ahead.
I feel like by keeping the electoral college votes, because you still give those little states a chance to have a voice.
But those little states, like what are we even saying? Like what
Can I just? I have an answer for this whole thing for election reformation.
yeah.
If we just made voting fucking mandatory, then wouldn't it just not take out the necessary electoral vote of, oh, we need to figure out the percentage tile of this? Now bitches can't argue about how, oh, this state doesn't matter now, because no, everybody voted. So now it's not just the overall of the people who decided to vote in the state, based on gerrymandering and shit. It's based on what the actual people in the United States want. Because, as you know, a democracy that doesn't have legislated entry into democracy into effect where everyone participates. A democracy where nobody participates is no longer a democracy.
Yeah, Joe, I'm gonna strongly push back on that. I'm immediately suspicious of any like forced participation in democracy. I mean, like Saddam Hussein won 98% of the vote in Iraq or something like that. Like, do you remember that? And
yeah, I remember that.
And that had.
I'm not pushing for fucking fake elections and bullshit or forced mandatories.
No, but I don't think mandatory voting is a good idea. Like I used to, but the problem with mandatory voting is that if people aren't enthused to vote but voting is mandatory, then I mean you see this in like psychological studies, in sociological studies, where if the participants if the participants are just giving you an answer because they're required to give you an answer, then you're not getting good data. Who
says you just force them to participate with nothing in return? You're supposed to incentivize people to vote. It shouldn't be something that you're just like, oh, I don't want to do that.
I get Elijah's
exactly, but that's why voting should not be mandatory, because it should be incentivized. Like making voting mandatory is authoritarian. What a better solution is making Election Day a national holiday. Like I think
there we go.
And anyone could agree.
That's good. I actually do agree with the Election Day holiday.
I actually like that much better. And I get Elijah's point, because it's like that's like if saying like, oh, like you buy something on Amazon do not get the package until you submit a review. And you're just gonna be like, okay, 5 stars, it was good.
Exactly.
Just so you can get your.
The data you're
And
getting
then
is
that
quality.
introduces a lot of people that like, oh, okay, how many of
I
these
get that.
5
Now,
star
I
reviews
do
are
want to
actually
say,
genuine?
I do want to say that I'm not necessarily saying we should do that. I'm giving a one of the various oftentimes brought up points when it comes to how to fix the issue with people not voting.
Yeah,
I do 100% agree with making Election Day a national holiday. I believe that should have happened from the very beginning.
I agree with that as
I
well.
think mandatory voting comes from a good place, and that's like wanting everyone to contribute to society, but I don't think its effects are good. And I think it should be, what we should be focusing on is making voting easier and making information more accessible, like on platforms and candidates. And I think both of those things are pretty sorely lacking. But I mean, voting should be participatory. But participatory. Democracy should be participatory, not like mandatory. That's kind of antithetical to democracy.
Okay, I gotta ask you guys to real quick, just to get us back on task, if that's okay. How are we going to reform the election itself? The mismanagement of the DNC, the obstruction coming from people like Schultz and all of the other managements, even back in Kane's administration when he was a DNC head, and looking towards how our elections are set up. It's not just getting people to the polls. It's making sure the election is legitimized. So how do we reform all of this and campaign financing and everything in between?
I think that I'm not gonna say I think that because I don't know its implications yet. I want to throw it out there. What if political parties were managed more like unions?
How so? Like where everyone within the party had more say over what the party did?
Yeah, exactly. Versus like this one DNC chair guy acting as the head.
Yeah, what's interesting.
Instead of like.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Like yeah, that was pretty much it. Like if we had like unions, I'm not necessarily you have to pay for it, but once you're a member, like you have like this say, and instead of just like this one guy kind of decides the platform of the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, it's interesting you bring that back to unions because the interesting like two interesting things about unions and participation in unions is that if participation isn't mandatory within a union, then the union's going to serve people who don't benefit the union, and people are basically freeloading on that. So, kind of contradicting myself here, but I think if unionization is going to be a thing, or if people are going to benefit from unions, then participation in the union needs to be sort of mandatory, or like those people shouldn't benefit in the same.
Well, that's a little different. That's a little different than.
Yeah.
I don't think you're actually being hypocritical by saying that, because a citizen doesn't sign up to be a citizen,
but
therefore it's kind of immoral to force them to vote. A person in a labor union decides to be in the labor union, therefore a qualification for being in the union should be you have to participate in this.
Yeah, but in the same,
I mean, like
in the same vein, like if you're going to be in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but if you're going to be in a political party, then I think you need to. I don't think you necessarily need to be an activist within that party, but.
I can tell you right now, if you force people in either major party if you tell them they have to do something, they're all going to become independent.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem.
Well then.
Yeah, I mean that's just the reality. Like, but the thing is that like, not, Zizek has Slavoj Zizek has made this point that like, to a certain extent, we're all authoritarian because we don't want to like have endless debates about. I don't know, like whose job it is to be on neighborhood watch patrol and whose job it is to like manage the water supply, and like we want to streamline society by delegating jobs to people, and we do that by representing people through our democracy. Like for the next 4 years, it's your job to decide how water is managed, and for the next 4 years, it's your job to direct the police department or whatever. Like that's why we have elections. That's why we don't have a direct democracy on every issue, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess that like this is the most anarchist thing I think I'm going to say on the podcast, but like I think it's gotten to this point, and I'm not just saying this about politics in general, but I'm going to take and like kind of say this about them. Like, at what point does like you have like these, like you bend the rules so much that like you don't your representatives don't necessarily represent you anymore.
Yeah.
And then like the idea of a democracy, of not a democracy actually, the idea of a republic is that you have people out there representing you, and like like on paper that sounds exactly like how anything should be. That gets to a point, that gets to a population so big that their democracy is just impractical. But with so many gray areas in politics, it's starting to seem now that, like for instance, lobbying. Like I'm really against lobbying as a concept, as the fact that you have to pay for a bill to get passed.
Well,
Like that's
I'm pro lobbying in the sense that I think it's okay for interest groups, um, like especially like civil rights groups, to be able to talk and interface directly with politicians, but I don't think that should be on a pay-by-play basis.
yeah, and the sad reality is that it is on a pay-by-play basis, and I think that just how it's like politics is modern politics now. It's just kind of like who lobbies more, who can cash in more for their cause, is who gets the most representation. I feel like this is the kind of same path where the DNC is going, in which like the organizations that kind of like shell out the most dough are the ones that get their platform represented the most in the DNC.
Yeah, yeah, that's really it.
All right.
I mean, well,
This is one of many.
here's one more thing actually to add on that. Now that I just thought of it, like,
Okay.
um, if the DNC is going to be like what it needs to be, and that's a party of the people, then it's the way we organize the DNC right now. Like, if you are a prominent member of the Democratic Party, then that's how you become important in the DNC. Like, that's how you functionally become important. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be better to have like the Democratic Party elect people to DNC roles, but I don't necessarily think that like the entirety of the Democratic Party should write the platform of the Democratic Party, because like people don't have time for that. That's why
Right.
we have
Right.
representatives. So I mean, like rather
Yeah,
than
because like
sorry, go ahead.
I continue.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Or like yeah, I completely get you, because like if we just had every day like a list of emails on voting for ballots every single day, like that's over. Like no one has the time for that. That's very impractical. Like that's why we have representatives. You're right. And I guess I just want the DNC to function more as an electoral college than as a president, if we're like taking terms from our own elections.
Yeah, I would say that, well, I mean, for example, like the Keith Ellison for DNC thing, like it's cool that we can like say that we want Keith Ellison to be the DNC chair, but we actually have no power over that. Like the people who are going to appoint Keith Ellison, I mean, appoint, not elect, are insiders in the Democratic Party who are already in power. And if you have like a structure like that, that isn't a democracy, that's just kind of like a insiders club, then you're going to get the same establishment Democrats over and over again, no matter where the party needs to be or what the majority of the party wants.
Exactly. Like it feels like to get into DNC chair, it's not about like, oh, I have to appeal to Democrats the most. It's just that I gotta have the most connections and sometimes the most money
Yeah.
to make those connections happen.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. Are we wrapping up?
I mean, we still have a good 20 minutes.
We do?
10,
okay, wow.
10 minutes, I'm sorry. We have a good like 10, 15 minutes.
All right, well, if you guys want to, I have another question for you guys, and if you want to tangent off. We're looking at a society where the left is starting to fracture. I mean, you have the Justice Democrats, you have the Green Party, you have the so-called Bernie-crats that are labeling themselves as independents. You have people in the DSA and the SA and all of these other little small groups. And they need to collide, and they need to showcase a platform that matters. at least the next few episodes, I still believe we're going to be talking about these fundamental issues on what our platform should be to re-register the Democratic Party. I need to ask you guys, what on earth do we do about the people that are currently in charge of the Democratic Party? It's not only are we going to have to primary them, but we have to ask, what are we going to have to do about all of their ideals and their methods of mismanaging this thing? How do we stop the train wreck? And it can't just simply be elect these people. It needs to be something along the lines of we have to recreate the structural format of how we manage this thing.
Yeah, if we're gonna
I think
good.
I'm not gonna give a direct solution as to the format that needs to happen, but I think that more than anything, there needs to be more interaction between the top of the party and the regular members. Like the DNC chair isn't seen as something personable, something you are supposed to relate with. It's not someone who in your party who you feel passionate about. It's just kind of like this figurehead of an upper society that just kind of governs your party.
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. But I think the more we do need fundamental reforms to the Democratic Party. I think we touched on this in a previous episode, Joe, but this idea that
they're all starting to merge together for me.
Yeah, this idea that a third party is going to replace the Democratic Party or is going to come in and save the day it's just not realistic. The only game in town is seizing the Democratic Party, and if we're going to seize the Democratic Party, then that might not initially require the fundamental reform of making the Democratic Party function democratically, but it's going to have to if it's going to be sustained. What we need.
Well, how do you guys think we're going to be, to touch on your point, we can't go on a tangent to get a third party. That's already been proven historically to fail. But I listed several third parties that consider themselves the birth of the new left. How are we going to get all these people to come to one?
Well, we don't need to at the local level.
With more communication.
At the local level, in local government, I think the best solution might be to have multiple parties, because at that level, multiple parties can actually function. When you're interfacing with the people who are voting for you, because there are so few people in such a small local area, that's when third parties become possible. And it's not, I mean, my personal opinion is I'm a registered Democrat, but my allegiance isn't really to the Democratic Party. My allegiance is to,
whatever's the left.
No, well, practical politics, and the Democratic Party, again, taking the Democratic Party back is the only game in town. But
yeah.
But if a third party at the local level can serve the needs of that locality better than the Democratic Party, and it's feasible to try to elect them, then go for that. I mean, that's how Bernie Sanders won, is he was better than the Democrat and Republican running when he got elected to mayor of Burlington and Congress and then the Senate. And I mean, that's just Vermont. That's not a huge deal, but I do think that at the federal level we'll need to elect a Democrat. And it needs to be I'm not going to say a Bernie-crat, but it needs to be an actual progressive. It needs to be someone who moves us away from neoliberalism. But at the local level and even at the state level, it's possible to embrace third parties, and that if that's a better alternative, then I'm all for that. So on the other hand, we should be actively trying to take the Democratic Party back. We shouldn't abandon the Democratic Party, because then we have no political force anymore. But the Democratic Party as it is dying, and really our only
we need to revive it.
Yeah, that's our only hope at this point. Otherwise we're fucked.
I think that above any, if there's one point I want to get across on reform, it said there needs to be more communication within the party, because like the Republicans have found a figure who they see as human, and they see as he gets angry and he gets sad and happy and he's arrogant and he is human. He's not like this blank slate business-esque person.
I've actually never seen Donald Trump happy or sad. Like, I don't think he is. I've only
Well,
ever,
you know what I mean.
I've
Like,
only ever seen.
He has one emotion, it's angry, and it burns out
well,
real quick.
I've only seen anger and like,
Smug.
yeah, smugness basically. Which, I mean, that's kind of
well,
sociopathic.
and he relates to angry, smug people, aka Republicans.
Oh my god! All right. On that note, I thank you for listening to the third episode of the Broletariat Podcast. We are working on getting a website up. I know I've probably been saying that since we started, but do realize we are bulk recording these for at least right now. I'd like to thank you, Elliot, for coming on last minute notice, I should say, for this episode.
Did we lose?
I
Elliot?
expected a comment, but I expected a comment. I guess not. Other than that,
Is Elliot there?
it's very good. He should be.
I'm right here.
Oh, okay. Well, you could say like you're
I'm
welcome.
listening.
He's here.
Jeez, you don't have to be so
I love
polite.
you.
Wow.
He's from the left. What do you expect? Oh. I do want to say thank you very much for showing up. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you, the listener, for clicking that like, comment, and subscribe button. It's all one now.
No. Just
I'm Joe.
stop.
Stop, Joe.
I'm Joe Kaminski.
Joe.
I'm Joe Kaminski. You can follow me on my website, josephkaminski.org. I
Dislike.
highly encourage you. I have quite a few articles on all the subjects that I talked about today. The Broletariat is only one of my many projects. I encourage you to look more into me. You can follow me on Twitter at Publishing Minds. All the links that we talk about will always be in the description. I'm here right now, episode 3, with Elijah Hintz and Elliot Declet.